We are told that Gaza fishing vessels have left Gaza port to come out and escort us in. Later we hear they have been turned back by Israeli warships. Soon we are 10 nautical miles from the Shura line, well within Gaza territorial waters. Still, no warships on our horizons. Where are they? Finally we get a call from Free Gaza. Ramatan is reporting that Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni has just issued an official statement declaring that Israel will not intercept the boats. The growing international pressure from around the world has broken the siege for the first time in 41 years. The seas grow calmer and euphoria again builds among our passengers. Rentor while aboard the SS Free Gaza. I was used to thinking that the Mediterranean Sea was so much smaller than the Atlantic Ocean that one could appreciate the difference once setting sail on the smaller body, yet the Mediterranean is indeed an ocean in its own right both in terms of size and tempest, and within 1 hour I was vomiting what little I had in my stomach as the vessel rocked and pitched without end, and with the setting sun I was retching my empty innards over the side. But we all faithfully took care of each other, making sure to keep some solid food in our tummies at all times, to getting enough water, and keep our life jackets on when not going below. The rolling motion was bad enough to force the seekers to tether themselves before leaning over the rail. As was the case on land, the deck bristled with electronics, cell phones continually charging, laptops being used to monitor media signals, and anything that pertained to our voyage, in addition to more standard equipment for the crew, to navigate and keep an ear to all other passing traffic. The high point of all this monitoring came with word that the Israeli Ministry of Information, after repeated warning that Israeli forces will never permit our landing in Palestine, announced that now they will leave us alone, ostensibly due to the nature of our action being humanitarian and peaceful. The real reason for this 180-degree decision had much more to do with anticipated world criticism of Israel if they had tried to stop us. Earlier, a formal letter addressed to Free Gaza movement from their information minister concluded that, because our shipment of aid and our intent to carry back Arab passengers was being carried out directly between FG and Gaza's outlawed Hamas government, our actions must be deemed as support of terrorism. Their reversal of position on this was clearly a public relations-oriented contradiction of a very long-standing policy. As we came within 20 nautical miles off the Gaza coast, our radio contacts on board the SS Liberty insisted that we wait. Fed up with roughing it, all the sickness, and unrequited anticipation of landing, Greta Berlin, me, and others aboard SS Free Gaza committed virtual mutiny by way of handheld communicators, first by arguing on the efficacy of waiting any longer, then by drawing from the consensus on our boat that we will continue without the Liberty if they choose to remain and wait. More than 1,000 yards separated us before Liberty turned about and followed. 2 to 3 hours, the coastline at last appeared after we spotted an imposing smokestack to the north, Ashkelon, Israel. Just as we began to make out the harbor's opening at Gaza City, a speedboat with 4 men raced toward us, frantically waving, and all smiles. Another soon followed, then the welcoming committee's watercraft grew bigger and bigger, each one bristling with the natives, circling our vessels, weaving in and out. The emotional climax came with the sighting of the breakwater's endless masses of cheering Gazans 40,000 strong. Children dove from the boats into the polluted water, far from shore, eagerly grabbing for the balloons that we started blowing up an hour earlier and tossed into the bay. Then, as if to seal the 2-year promise by FG to close a gap and make Palestine's sea route open once and for all, the boats sidled up to Free Gaza and Liberty and spilled their teary-eyed passengers onto our deck, who then embraced us as if we were liberating soldiers. Dr. Bill's account of the arrival from aboard the Liberty. Land ahoy. Someone shouts. We scanned the shore with our binoculars. We are now inside 3 nautical miles, and then the Gaza City skyline gradually enlarges in front of us. In spite of all the hardships during the past few years, Gaza shines like an emerald at this moment from the bow as we head in. As we get closer, the reality becomes clearer. Gaza is overcrowded. To the north, we see the coal-fired power plant across the border in Ashkelon, Israel, then the crowded cinder block buildings of Beach refugee camp, then more sturdy high-rise buildings and towering minarets in the Rimmel district of Gaza City, and then wall-to-wall inhabitation all the way south as far as we can see beyond the town and refugee camp of Deir al-Balah. Now we can pick out the marina. And there are fishing boats packed with Gazans coming out to greet us. The breakwater is packed wall to wall with people cheering. As we enter the port it is sheer joy, jubilation, and pandemonium. It is as if we were astronauts returning from the moon. After all, each and every one of the Apollo astronauts has been to the moon and back, and an additional 3.5 decades have passed since the last humans have arrived from international waters into Gaza port. The only possible exception might be hostile Israeli commandos, courtesy of their navy. We are much more friendly visitors than that. Hundreds of boys are swimming out to our boats from the shore, as local fishing boats encircle us. It looks chaotic and dangerous, especially for the fearless young boys in the water. I'm hoping no one gets it and injured by a vessel or its propeller. Several dignitaries come aboard our vessels via the fishing boats, and we are served tea and coffee, while we attach a ladder to the sides of our boats, to accept those who have swam out to us from shore. A Boy Scout band plays for us from an adjacent boat. Pretty soon, both boats are jam-packed with people all over the deck, and on the roof above. There has to be a limit. We haven't even docked yet, and it is difficult to see how we will get through all the crowds in the water to do so. Finally, the police detail starts coming aboard our vessels to do crowd control and limit further boarding of our boats. Our vessels ease their way through the local fishing boats and people in the water and finally reach their moorings. We slowly disembark and are escorted through the dense crowds and onto buses that will take us a couple blocks up the beach to the El Dira Hotel, our new home, while we are in Gaza. We are pressing the flesh like crazy and hugging all the children all the way to the bus. A woman gives me a sash made of green fabric with Arabic writing and places it over my head like I'm some sort of war hero. I say, shukran, thank you. We all gain insight about what it must be like to be famous politicians, rock musicians, or members of a professional sports team. Bella, after disembarking from the SS Free Gaza. Reprinted from Sharon Locke, Gaza Beneath the Bombs, London, Pluto Press, 2010, pages 12 to 14. Dear everyone. How can I possibly begin to coherently tell you anything of the last 24 hours? I can't even comprehend any of it right now, let alone communicate it. You'll just have to get it in scraps of thoughts. Ivan and I are sitting here right now trying to think of the date yesterday. We've made history and neither of us even knows what day we did it on, says Ivan. Just as well that it wasn't us running the Battle of Hastings. We'd be saying 1063, or was it 1065? We've now agreed it was August 23rd yesterday, and I'm very much hoping this finally gets me into the Houseman's Peace Diary, without dying, even if just for next year. We left Cyprus August 22nd, in the morning, and were very lucky to have it, and the following day be the only 2 slightly cloudy days I've experienced on board. Because normally, there simply wasn't enough shade for 25 of us above deck on the Free Gaza, and below was steaming hot. The sea was good in sailors' terms, but enough so that most people were a little sick, and about 8 were very sick. Working as a medic with former nurse Kathy turned out to be the perfect job for me. I spent most of the night feeling a little queasy, unless lying flat on the deck, but one of my comrades was so ill all night that we had to give her Dialorite at 15-minute intervals most of the night. I simply lay down beside her, drowsing in between dosing her, observing our fantastic crew, including the wondrous OJ, and Vic who along with me learned the basics of piloting, as they stepped over me and Donna to keep the Free Gaza going through the night in 2-hour watches. The sense of being in a great randomly rocking cradle was intensified by watching the unchanging stars above me. Sometimes I could get up for a little while and gaze at the horizon, sea edged in all directions, watching lights of the occasional other ship, which always unnerved us a little, as well the red port light of the Liberty moving parallel with us. In the day, the sun was harsh, but in the sea at night there is just beauty. By early evening, we were getting what I considered the best quality Channel 16 harassment of the trip. Channel 16 is the emergency channel that must always be kept unobstructed. But ever since sailing from Greece there'd been regular strange messages in Hebrew, Arabic music being played to us, etc. This time, someone was just repeating "they're lost. They're lost." Simple yet very sinister under the circumstances. Who was lost? Us. The Liberty? But we could see their lights. Or could we? Was that really the Liberty? And if it was, did it still have people aboard? How could we be sure? Because for long stretches at a time, we couldn't contact each other. Never trust technology. I tell you, we had it all: satellite phones, radios, and extremely expensive satellite internet and video streaming to little benefit. The video streaming had apparently been sabotaged pretty thoroughly from long distances before we even set sail, though we had some capability sometimes. Everything else stopped working on both boats shortly after the "they are lost" broadcast. We were no longer able to use the normal sea communication systems even for SOS messages. We heard later that the Greek government, wondering how the MP they sent with us was doing, had tried every method to contact us, and eventually decided we must have been sunk. Before the communication system went down, however, we'd heard that media coverage had taken off, and that the Arab League had announced its support of us, and stated that Israel must act in every way to protect our peaceful mission. Then there was silence. But we had two secret weapons, our walkie-talkies, apparently too low-tech to be sabotaged, that allowed us to talk between boats, and the two journalists on board, Mr. Amatan and Mr. Al Jazeera, had a working satellite phone. Using this, we put out a press release announcing the apparent sabotage, and calling particularly on the Greek government to protect us as we were sailing under Greek flags. Actually, we were sailing under about 50 flags, including a Freelian at Peltier 1, but you know what I mean. Morning was a blessing. Everyone cheered up, I felt fine again, and the sick people attempted some dry Greek bread. The amazingly cheerful Lauren stopped juggling walkie-talkies and made yet another round of tea. Let me apologize now for thinking her most useful role was going to be being related to Tony Blair. The working satellite phone began ringing and didn't stop. Mushy giving interviews in Arabic, Vic in Italian, and Jeff in Hebrew. We began to put up more flags. Messages came in about whether a media boat was coming or not coming from Israel to meet up with us. We kept grabbing passing crew and asking them how many hours until we left international waters. 2, 1. Then, having established contact again with the Liberty, we had an argument with them, miles out from Gaza territorial waters. Paul and Vangelis wanted to postpone entering Gaza waters, our most dangerous stretch, to cross in terms of potential Israeli attack until the next morning, so we'd avoid the greater risk of attack at night. But we on SS Free Gaza weren't interested. If we weren't stopped, we'd reach Gaza in 3 hours, and there would still be 3 hours until dusk. We called our Gaza hosts. "Yalla, come now," they said. Technically we had a steering committee of 3 on our boat, Greta, Musher and Jeff, and 2 on the Liberty. But the discussion was happening on walkie-talkie, which made it impossible. We'd created an odd-numbered steering committee to vote, if they had to, and as I saw it, clinging to some semblance of process, that's what we'd just defaulted to. That is, our entire boat including 3 steerers wanted to go ahead. The Liberty asked for an hour to talk. "No," said the Free Gaza, "that hour's daylight can't be wasted, we're off." And we did the boat equivalent of stomping off. I don't dare imagine what the Liberty thought of us at that point, as we watched them get smaller and smaller. 20 minutes later, we got a call from the Israeli media. The foreign minister had just stated, "We are not going to stop the boats. We weren't going to prison. Vic wasn't going to be climbing the mast. I wasn't going to be shot for refusing to cooperate with the Israeli Navy. We weren't going to get to eat our siege supply of vine leaves. Lauren wasn't going to get to sing Israeli men to the tune of It's Raining Men as we were boarded, which was just as well, since we hadn't worked out the dance routine yet. None of that was happening. The impossible was happening instead. We were going to go to Gaza. So there we were, with Derek, our first mate, shouting at us to tidy up our boat for its imminent achievement of the impossible, arrival to Gaza. We lurched about, picking up roll mats and empty water bottles, and putting them down again, to go and stand in the bow, gazing at a hazy horizon. Derek climbed the mast. I don't know how much time passed, all I was doing was beaming at everybody in turn.